So let us really arrive here in the Zoom room, taking in everyone who is here with us. As we are starting to have real hot days, we have a little heat wave here for 3 days now, which is a bit early. So, feeling how you're coming here today, what you're bringing, feel stressed or maybe a little bit under the weather or at ease. Last week, I have been sharing, about inviting archaic memories of well-being and confidence to emerge organically through sensing deeply, into the body and the memories which are stored there, individually and more powerfully collectively. And also, through the support of ritual or through the support of ritual space, like this Earth Room, for example, is such a space which symbolically expresses the work. And then I've also been saying, that's not an imitation of indigenous traditions or a form of escapism into the long gone past, but it's more like an intentional practice to become more able, to communicate with our own experience inside and outside, quote unquote, of our bodies in a more sensitized and open way. It's called also a polyculturalization of our capacity to communicate. So capacity for diversity, being able to take in many different facets of looking and seeing. And I really, often speak about the poly crisis or the multiple crisis we are now facing, the interlocking actually, that makes them particularly tenacious and confusing, to think about that with the dualistic thinking mind, because it's that kind of a mind which has created the situation. And there's not yet much capacity, on a global level to come to a consensus, because it would require that co-sensing. In order to come to a consensus, we would need to co-sense, and there are just very small little beginnings of that, but we still have to go a really far way in order to come to a response, which is more coordinated globally, and a sense of, of justice, for example, about CO2 emissions, which have been mainly made by the global north, and the global south is having most of the repercussions for now. This alone, is a huge issue, but there's very slow progress. There is some progress, but it's very slow. And it's sometimes really kind of flabbergasting how slow it is. But then if one understands trauma, then one can understand, why it's so slow because there's so much numbing and incapacity to connect with our experience in an intimate way, so that there is a kind of rapport and true information is able, to inform us. So that's, part of what we are doing here, is to try to train our instrument, the body and the mind, to be able to be more in intimate connection with the data flow, so that out of that, solutions can emerge. And it has to be done individually and collectively. And we are just a little hub here, a little pocket of sanity, trying, to do the work which is necessary. And I've brought a quote with me, which I really love, from the Tao Te Ching. And it's quote number 63 of the translation of Stephen Mitchell. And it says, confront the difficult while it is still easy. Accomplish the great task by a series of small acts. The master never reaches for the great, thus she achieves greatness. When she runs into a difficulty, she stops and gives herself to it. She doesn't cling to her own comfort, thus problems are no problem for her. I think that's very powerful. When she runs into a difficulty, she stops and gives herself to it. She doesn't cling to her own comfort. Thus, problems are no problem for her. So, if we can slow down and give ourselves fully to a situation, then we start to feel less separate and more connected, and are more able, to connect to that natural data flow of any situation, to land in us and to inform us, to become part of our form, how we show up in the world. So, the depth of the words actually is quite astonishing, because landing is an amazing, accurate word here. Because it means, being grounded in the body, and through that being also grounded in the planet, because the body and the planet are one process. And through that, we can more and more onboard undigested material from the past, which is called trauma, is one way, how that can be called. Because as long as those trauma patterns haven't been digested, they're gonna come back again and again and again. The past comes back and takes over. Individually, collectively, and globally. And I'm sure we can all, notice that in our own life, there are certain things, which have not been digested yet, and that they repeat themselves until we finally, have the capacity to allow enough space and allow the digestion process to naturally occur. Because usually, if we have difficulties coming up, there's a sense of, we are contracting and we are bracing ourselves against it. There's a sense of aversion. No, I don't want this. And then through that sense of, contraction and aversion, we experience pressure. And then we think, the pressure comes to us from outside. But actually, the pressure is the aversion, which we are bringing to the situation. That creates the pressure. And, that's intellectually probably quite easy to understand, once we have heard it and maybe seen it in our own experience. But then to stay with that and bring space to it, that's the practice, and that can be, very challenging. But I really love that sentence, fake it until you make it. I mean, it doesn't have to be relaxed or anything. It just needs to be made conscious, And then, you are experiencing the pressure, but you're not putting pressure on top of the pressure so that it goes away, because that's why it's never going to go anywhere. It just becomes more. I think that's really one of the most important points of the practice is, if there is a difficulty and we are sensing aversion because we want it to go away, then to embrace the difficulty plus the aversion and allow both of that to be here, and add softness to it, kindness to it, allowing it to be what it is. And first of all, stop. Don't react, but allow, the system to take in what's happening. Allow it to digest by sitting with it or walking with it, but allowing it into consciousness, and also allowing that pressure of aversion to become conscious, and the fear, the thoughts which are thrown up and all of that stuff, to see the conditionality of what's happening in the present moment. This is the main opening, to healing. And that's, in a way, the hallmark of the Buddha's teaching. How do I deal with this? Anything what comes up, how do I deal with this? What do I do with this? Not only on the meditation cushion, but also in daily life. And then also, considering, where am I? Where do I want to go? And what fits in here? What fits in, so that I can continue to walk into the direction I want to walk, rather than repeating the past, again and again. And for that, we need to stop and give ourselves fully to the difficulties. Fully giving to it, which means, our whole body, our whole reactive patterning, all of it. We allow all of it to be here, holding it in an embrace of softness and gentleness. And then we might, notice we are tensing up again, and then just consciously softening to it. I think that's something which can be done. And through that softening, more information more of the data flow of the situation is allowed to inform us, because we are not shutting down. We are not putting up a wall, but we are allowing it to come in, and through that, holding that all in stillness, then suddenly we can see certain facets of the situation we couldn't see before, because we have been too quickly, shutting down, too quickly interfering, too quickly saying something or doing something or writing something, just because we want it to go away. And to not do that, This is the challenge. And to fake it until we make it, to consciously fake it. I think that's such a good thing to remember. We don't need to be completely relaxed and at ease. That's not what the master does. But she gives herself fully, whatever it is. And so in that way, it's how we are relating to our experience is more important than the experience itself. The how is more important than the what. And that's like, yeah, that's the hallmark of the Buddhist teaching, because the liberation of the heart mind is about the how we are relating, not what it is, because we have very little control over what's happening, but we can cultivate our ways of reacting or responding to what's happening. This is where the freedom lies. And that freedom, can be continuously grown and grown. And through growing that freedom, we are maturing. And this is how wisdom is cultivated, and compassion. Through difficulties, through meeting difficulties and allowing them a place in our lives, allowing them to land in our lives. This is how our lives become bigger and bigger. How all of the walls, are starting to crumble one after the other. And then you can surprise yourself, you don't have to figure it all out by yourself, but it's much more an invitation and allowing of information to emerge out of a bigger world, not living in such a small world where it's always the same, and the same, but just opening. And this requires, the capacity to be with the discomfort of the stretching. And, and then we remember, fake it until you make it. It's okay to feel really terrible, to feel crazy, or to feel like, I can't do it. To tell it, to yourself. It's okay, all of those things, this is just words, this is thoughts. And it's good, to share this with other people. And, maybe share it even with a professional who helps us work with this, but not falling for it. This is the past. And the past needs to be onboarded and digested. And then through that, our world, our life opens up. And that's, what we are doing here together through these guided meditations. So let's now, shift into the meditation and, sensing into the body, how it is today. And probably all of us, we know, how it feels when the body is contracted and when there is a sense of separation and a sense of hardening against the flow of life, which is an old pattern of protecting ourselves, which has had great intelligence at a time, when we were still unable to, take charge of our own lives. But now we are adults. And often, we still enact those old early patternings because they haven't been digested yet. They haven't been fully onboarded yet. And that healing process is fundamental for a deeper connecting with the planet. The more this old patterning has been healed, the more capacity we have for landing, for grounding, for being in the body, for really feeling out that body and experiencing it as a plug-in into the planet, into this much vaster process of great self-organizing intelligence. And we all knowing, that this is the work which the human species needs to do at this threshold, to come back to a cooperation with the larger biosphere, and to give up that fantasy of separation and extraction. That's what is asked of us. That's the next evolutionary step. And we are like in an in-between time, between paradigms, between narratives. And it's not for the first time that our species is in such an in-between time. The last big one was at the end of the Middle Ages, when the individual became more apparent. Before that, people lived very much in a sense of being part of a collective. And then about the 12th century or so, 11th and 12th century, that started to change. And then we started to develop a very different relationship to the biosphere. Developed science and technology, and we are still, under that paradigm. But we are already waking up to the fact that this paradigm is hitting the wall really. The limitations of the biosphere can no longer support that trajectory. And more people wake up to that. There's like a sense of intuition of knowing there's things are coming to a huge turn. But the old patterning is still operating. So this is the great discomfort of, still having the momentum, but having to stand still and not go further down that trajectory. That's a great discomfort to allow that experience to become conscious. And, that's why we meet as a collective, because doing it together is easier. The sum total of the parts of the group is bigger than just the individuals together. There's some extra space which we need, in order to allow this data flow to be received. And that's what we want, to allow the data flow to change us, make space for it to come through, to come in. And do the work. And then, there's also thinking, and all of that is necessary. But first, we need to be informed on a non-verbal level. By standing on the land, on the ancestors which have all emerged out of that land and which are part of the land. They have come out of the land and gone back into the land. Just we have come out of the land through our mothers, and we'll go back into it when we die. And through framing in this way, we are opening up a different vista. and connecting with biointelligence. So with the in-breath, we can breathe in the presence of the planet underneath the place where we are sitting right now. And with the out breath, we can allow roots to go down into the planet. So the stability and the vastness. And we can attune to that consciously. And really getting used to that possibility of experiencing it directly. So that we become so confident in that when we are in challenges, that we can remember it. Even we can't really maybe feel it, but we can fake it because the memory is strong enough that we can fake it until we make it. And we have the capacity, to be with the turmoil, to be with the pressure, to be with the stress, and not react from that place, but just be softening towards it. And then, as we are doing this, we become more and more confident that this actually works. And the numbing and the shutting down and all of this is no solution. It just, it's like putting it into the freezer. Using a lot of electricity to keep it frozen. You don't need to do that. We can just, one step at a time, digest and grow through that, growing in capacity to be with the difficulties. Because that's how wisdom and compassion are cultivated, through difficulties. And that lovely saying, the obstacles are not in the way, the obstacles are the way. Just looking at the mind, how it is right now. Yeah, as we are more settled into the body, the mind also starts to settle. This is why it's important to have a stable posture for meditation, because the mind is going to follow the body. Just noticing the state of the mind. And also the feeling tone in the body and feeling tone in the mind. The feeling tone is the place, where the body and the mind meet. And just really, paying attention to the feeling down or Vedana, how it's called in Pali, because that is dominating us if we are not conscious of it. Because the system has like an inbuilt knee-jerk reaction, always wanting the pleasant feeling tone. And that was once, like important information when we lived, in the forests and, didn't know what's gonna meet us at the next corner. We needed to make very fast decisions of, running or staying. But now in this ways how we live now, we need to take in the information still of the feeling tone, but see it in context and know what is appropriate, This is, how we have developed the frontal cortex in order to be able to investigate and see things in context with others we're living together with. And now at this time, our frontal cortex needs to be trained to look even deeper, not just about the people we are living together with, but the more than human world as well, because we are totally dependent on that too. The way how we treat the more than human world, particular animals. So we need to develop new capacities of intimacy. That's just maturing, really. Like a teenager, who doesn't really think about what the parents also have needs. Many teenagers, let's say, not all of them. They don't have that capacity developed yet. And we as a species, we are like, adolescents. The way we treat animals, for food is really absolutely unacceptable. That can only be done, if there's a great numbing going on. Not an intimacy. There's movements, there is changes, but there's still a lot to be done. So being grounded, in the body and being grounded on the planet and supported, by that constant exchange. We find, a sense of belonging and purpose, to really open up and connect with this urge, to be part of the solution. To become the change we want to see. Rather than expecting for others to do that. And connecting with the heart and really sensing the compassion and the wish, may all beings be free from harm and the intention to harm. And that creates the spaciousness and the softness and the acceptance so that more of life, can land in us, no matter how uncomfortable. And, slowing down and faking it until we make it. That's something we really can do. So, with the in-breath, sensing the softness and the gentleness and the power of that openness. And with the out-breath, relaxing into the space and radiating out that powerful gentleness. This is like water. It can even, have an impact onto a rock. As we can see in the landscape, the riverbeds, which have been cutting through mountains, through the persistence and the capacity to adapt. They develop great power. And that's that kind of power which we want to embody. So to meet that pressure with gentleness, like a river, which hits the rock face. And it finds a way. It somehow always finds a way. And it gives herself fully to the difficulty and develops that intimacy, that deep relationship. Which, opens up the data flow and informs us so that completely new ways of looking and seeing become possible through the humility and the willingness to be with the fullness of the experience, growing and maturing and allowing more life to land in us. So with the out breath, we are really relaxing into the spaciousness, which doesn't end at the walls of the room we are sitting in. And maybe you can hear a ringing sound, the ringing sound of the silence, the vibrancy, the aliveness. The ringing of the ornaments of the mother, who always finds a way. And we can become part of that. Part of that, like a weed, which always finds a way to come through under the cracks of the concrete floor of the old narrative. Breaking through the cracks. And trusting that aliveness, that vibrancy, which always finds a way and has found a way since billions of years on this planet. Which is called so many, many names, depending on the culture and on the times. And at this point in history, it's a bringing back of the spaciousness and the receptivity of the feminine, which has been excluded for quite a long time now. Now it's coming back. And opening, our own hearts and minds for that energy and that expression of aliveness, to be embodied in this time of great need, and through that serving, serving the evolution, serving the circle of friends we are living, our families, society, being part of the solution, being part of the immune system in our small way. And sensing into the subtle joy which comes with that. It's like, reaching out into the more than human world and offering our solidarity. And, opening up and wanting to know, wanting to be informed. But we can embody and contribute. It's a slow process, like a river cutting through a mountain range. It's not gonna happen overnight, but it's happening. It's already happening. And, we need to fake it until we make it, until we are fully transformed. As we are digesting old defense mechanisms, old trauma, karma, and healing ourselves to be more and more part of that flow. and supporting each other by, showing up in this way, showing that we care, that we are willing to put in the work to be with the discomfort, to meet the difficulties, to give ourselves to those difficulties as a honing of our instrument, the body and the mind. And, not to forget the humor, the faking it until we are making it. That is very important, to be honest with ourselves. There's no other way. The river can't go back. It needs to flow. It needs to keep engaging, 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 engaging. Now we're gonna slowly come to the end of the meditation, and I'm gonna read again the parts of verse 63 in the Tao Te Ching. Confront the difficult while it is still easy. Accomplish the great task by a series of small acts. The master never reaches for the great. Thus she achieves greatness. When she runs into a difficulty, she stops and gives herself to it. She doesn't cling to her own comfort. Thus problems are no problem for her. And you're slowly coming out of the meditation and staying in contact with the body as you're opening your eyes and coming back into this room.